Hello, hello. This is Verse. You're listening version 4. I'm with Faustina Esoterica. The yeah. Here we are. I'm always bad at these intros. Say hi to the audience.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So let's get started then. You said you wanted to do a Vedic reading.
Yes. GRITCULT suggested me to start it off that way, so we would just smoothly go into it. I did not have a lot of time to look at it, so I'm kind of analyzing it right on the spot live with you. So just to give a few details
That works.
of your chart. All right, so the first thing I see is that you probably did you ever have an athletic pursuit or an athletic career?
I was on the swim team in high school.
Oh, right, I can see that you had some connection with water. Also, does your father have a connection with music? And
yes.
Does he also have an athletic connection?
Also, yes.
All right, interesting. So I see that both you and him are physically pretty strong.
Mm-hmm.
And also wait, now that I look at it, does your mother also have an athletic connection?
Also true. Yeah.
That's interesting. So
my family is very athletic.
Yeah, I see that you have family who is good at competition, business, sports, and also you had a probably pretty modern and open upbringing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very.
So
I don't know how much I've told on the podcast. I don't know if I want to completely dox my family.
Yeah, okay. I also respect boundaries, so I don't go too deep into the personal stuff that I see.
We can go a little bit into personal. We can do a little bit. I'll try to keep it.
I try to keep
reason.
it diplomatic as well, because I have also my moral codex to not reveal too much about my clients publicly. What I can also see is that you probably had a technical education, either with IT or mathematics or programming and things like that. Is that true?
Yes, it is. That is. I studied math and programming. Even though many think I just only studied philosophy, but I definitely have. I definitely was more tech inclined.
Yeah, I see that you have a technical education. Also, at one point in your life, were you ever involved with an NGO or nonprofit organization?
Yes, but I don't know if this counts only because it's in the family, so I don't know if that counts specifically. But yes.
So now that you hint this, now I can see something else. Does your family have a link with some type of institution that is connected with either higher authority or religion?
Also true.
Okay, so
historically.
Yeah, okay. So these are the main points I pick up right away when looking at your chart. That
For the audience, should they know my signs, like my sun sign or moon or rising or what have you?
I don't know if it's important for you, but your ascendant is Cancer, your sun sign is Capricorn, and your moon sign is Pisces. To talk about the main things, but I always read a chart as a whole and pick up different aspects and connect the link. It's kind of like interpretation. It's like having a map and reading it. So yes. And
is there more? Cool.
Yeah, I can give you a little bit of advice that you should definitely, for your spiritual progress, go on travels and long distance pilgrimage type of journeys, because then you will reveal more about you will understand yourself more and understand the depth of life more.
I feel like you're just encouraging my desire to drop out of society and go be a rogue.
Also, if you do business, you should do business with old things, antiquity, and things like oil and metals. If you ever break into that branch, you will gain a lot of money.
Yeah, commodities. All right, commodities and antiquities. I can do that.
Yeah, so that's just a little bit of advice I can give.
So for those who are less knowledgeable, like how does like Vedic astrology differ from, I guess, like Western astrology? I'm not.
Yes, this works with sidereal astrology, which is actually based on the movement of the planets through the constellations. Where the tropical astrology works with the seasons and fixed dates. So Aries season, for example, in tropical astrology always starts at the same day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's directly tied to the Gregorian calendar. But sidereal astrology, Western astrology, starts when Sun moves into the constellation of Aries. So it actually goes with the motion of stars and not with the seasons, because the stars always move and the planets always have a different type of movement. So it's always tropical astrology is always off with the actual sky and what's going on up there.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, cool. So I guess also like, so like my only thing I know about like Vedic astrology is like, there's like primary attributes and like basic motivations and like things like that. Like, is there like can you like go into that a bit, or is that, or do you kind of just keep it more like high level when you're doing a reading?
So with the Vedic astrology, there's always obviously the 12 houses and 12 signs, and this is also similar to Western astrology. But another aspect that gives you more specific insight into reading it is the lunar mansions, which is basically, you have to imagine a zodiac composed of 27 signs imposed over the 12 sign zodiac, which we know. Which gives you like more specific details. For example, a section in between the sign of Leo, when it comes to like 5 degrees, gives you a different result than 28 degrees Leo.
Okay.
And also Vedic astrology works with deities and their mythology. So there's a direct tie. Yeah, so it's directly tied to the mythology and story and traits of the certain deity governing a section of the sky. So if you study a sign and want to know more about it, you basically just have to read more about the deity and extract their traits and information and apply them to humans. So we basically are an extension of all of the things that play out in the holy texts.
Oh, that's cool. It also like separates it, it makes it more of like an archetype, like as opposed to like just like, like a, just something that someone kind of made up about like a personality. Like it has like, like a lineage of symbology to like associate, which is kind of, which I feel is lacking often when you're reading about like, when you're reading like Western astrology. I don't typically feel like there's like a lineage of like, yeah.
So archetype is basically a synonym for deity, if we put it like that. And in Western astrology, nothing regarding the gods or their influence in our life gets even regarded, and this is why it's not really prediction based. Where the Vedic astrology can basically like predict your whole life based on a chart.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess if you're acting in tune with like a deity or like a archetype, then you're inclined to certain
Exactly.
outcomes. Yeah, it gives it more of a
It's
more
scripts.
holistic.
I always like
Yeah,
to say it's we play out scripts.
that makes sense. I would agree with that because I mean it's hard. I mean, very few, if any, people ever really escape their like nature. Like once they kind of like get into like a groove, like of like a pattern, like a behavior pattern, it's kind of just it's cyclical. There's some deviations, but for the most part, you just end up being this entity more or less eternally. Um, so yeah, I dig that. Very cool. Thank you. I appreciate the reading.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So like, so kind of to like give background, you're part of the Goggins cult, uh, and you know, the whole point of this podcast is to kind of like bring shed light on like internet phenomenon and like interesting, I guess, personas and accounts or whatever. So there's no, I mean, there's really nothing more unique and interesting than like your this whole kind of, I don't even know, egregore of like accounts in this like Goggins cult and other cult adjacent cults. Can you like, what is the role of online communities, do you think, in your life or in your opinion?
So the question that many people ask when they see that is like, what exactly is even a cult?
Mm-hmm.
And the question we should ask ourselves is, what is not? Because if we look at the official definition of it and how it plays out, a cult is a system of religious veneration and devotion directed towards a particular figure or object. And
Mm-hmm.
in that sense, everything falls under the spectrum of cult, and the only separation of labels that happens within all of this is the boundaries. So, for example, religion could be also a cult, but the difference is that there's really like no initiation rituals, and that it's made very accessible, and that the resonance can be created on a very large scale
Mm-hmm.
with no limits. And if we look at the other side of the spectrum, a cult which has very impenetrable boundaries and very strict guidelines and rules would be a secret society.
Mm-hmm.
So if you move in a certain integral that resonates with your intention of the cult, you can achieve the desired magnetism of pulling in people and making them resonate with not only what you say, but what you embody.
That makes sense. Interesting. So like, would you say that like, well, actually, first off, I'll say that like I know that like in the U.S., like I like the point that you brought up about how religions have like like they resonate on like a more on like a mass level and there's no initiation. Also, in the U.S., they kind of like the separation they kind of create is like there's no the typically the figure the religion revolves around is dead, so there's no central like living figure any longer, whereas cults tend to have a central figure. um, and then obviously secret societies have like initiation rituals and stuff. So what would you say is the difference here in this case for an online version?
Um, I don't know if you noticed, but in GRITCULT, we don't even create an idol or an ideal that
Mm-hmm.
things revolve around. We just mirror the follower, which helps them be part of the experience, and everyone wants to be part of the journey. So people see themselves in the content. And even with religions, the dead persona is always made alive, otherwise it would not work. If they would not portray the person as if they were omnipresent and alive, it would not even have that pull. The only thing, the only reason why, I'm sorry, so the only reason they say they make them dead or portray them dead is to make them inaccessible and untouchable, and you always reach. So you can always reach. You understand what I mean?
Yes. It's like the carrot in front of the horse. Like you're always like yearning, and you can never actually get
the light at the end of the tunnel.
So what do you? Can you expand on what you said? What like the GRITCULT mirrors the followers? What does that mean?
So we don't create a person that is a paragon and the leader of the masses. And GRITCULT does not have a center which things revolve around. It revolves around itself. So the key here is to create extensions that develop their own life, and to make the follower part of the existence, and to not create a dependency that is a symbiotic relationship of I give you information and I tell you what to do, and you are subject to me and follow the order. So it's just a type of concept to create a community. And like I said, everything is a cult. We just label it. We just label it as what it is, to make people understand that even the clothes they wear, in a sense, are a cult. If you brand yourself, if you put a label on yourself.
That's very, very true. That is actually explicitly why I try my hardest to not wear clothing with any visible labels, because you are, I mean, like, I don't know, I hate to quote Marx, but that's like, what is it, commodity capital, some shit like that, where it's like you get some kind of like sense of self or some sense of like identity from the logo that you're kind of putting on yourself. And like that's why people now, like identify by like, what Marvel movie they like, or whatever, some like brand they like to shop at, or what have you, like Supreme or whatever. So that's a good observation, or like a good, I guess in this case, practice. So speaking of like logos and iconography, with like the GRITCULT has a very unique branding. What kind of role does that play in the whole, in your view?
So to say it like that, I'm not the person who's responsible for creating it. We are like
it's a collective.
But to speak on the importance of symbolism, I'm pretty sure you already know that this is a type of energy you attach to an image or a feeling that a person has when they think of GRITCULT. They think of that like magenta type of thing with the blue font on it. So it's important to create something you can connect with instantly. So that something that goes beyond what the brain has to process first. It's like an instinct. You create reflexes if you work with symbols and attach energy to them. So it's just an efficient way of encompassing what GRITCULT is about in a simple logo.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I would ask you to like help to analyze it more, but also I feel like that kind of defeats the purpose, right? Because like the whole point is that it bypasses like rationality and kind of is intuitive.
If you decipher a symbol too much, it will lose what it's, especially like ask someone outside of GRITCULT to decipher it. because
Yeah,
if I would do it, it would defeat the purpose.
that's true. That makes sense. So it's a collective. There's different. So there's no like central and like body in which it revolves around. Ideally, the followers are just as complicit in like the creation of GRITCULT, and it has like a very solid iconography. So I guess that makes it. I mean, yeah, that makes it a very unique entity online. There's very few other than like outside of like the actual corporation. There's very few things that kind of have that sense of like branding, and like I don't know, creation in like real time, I guess. So that's a very, I don't know. It's interesting to think about what's going on, what you guys are doing. Would you say that like there's a what I'm having a hard time phrasing this. I guess like if there's no like central person, like what do you think the role of like this like an individual is in this case, right? Because if something like historically, as you said before, there's like a central person, there's a central being that kind of everything revolves around. Why make the decision in this case to like remove that?
This is a good question. So if you even start to think about GRITCULT as a group of people distributing information to like lower ranking people, you will not understand it. You have to think about it as a tree with branches, and those branches have smaller branches. And identity is something that in this over-socialized society, especially with social media, it faded on a personal level, and it got stronger and bigger on a collective level. So people are not seen as an identity for what they wholly embody, but aspects of themselves create identities which allow people to identify with different aspects. You know, two different people can identify with the same aspect and thus take on a similar identity. At least this is how they're perceived nowadays. So the reason why you could say the ocean of the cults we create is so vast is so that we target and approach different branches and aspects of the identity of an individual so that they can keep their integrity without trying to cling to a personal identity, which this type of social sphere right now does not really make possible.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. That's a very I like to think of it. This is a concept I think about a lot from Deleuze, the individual versus the individual, where like the individual is like a unified self, and it's like the atomization, like the liberalism that historically modernities kind of revolves around. Whereas like Deleuze kind of speaks to like the breakdown of this like unified self and like different aspects of one of like the self being highlighted in different interactions and different faces and such. So this kind of speaks to that, and that it allows you to keep your integrity, as you said, but it does.
Yeah, the word grit is an integrity for a reason.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. So it's like it's a what's the word when it's rearranged anagram? It's, I guess like it can't, all those letters are in integrity. It's like it's part. I guess it's actually literally in the center of the word. Not the point. The point is like you got to keep your integrity, but also like it's robust and like multifaceted, which is very unique to like the modern online experience.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Oh yeah, keep going.
No. You were about to say something.
Oh no, I was just saying like it also like this is really part of what I'm so interested about like modern online phenomena now, which is again why I made this podcast. like I also often talk about like a pseudo anonymous, like anon accounts as attempting to do the exact same thing, where you kind of like trying to maintain a facet of integrity of yourself, but also by doing it by detaching yourself from your like identity, the so-called personhood, um, which that kind of interplay allows you to kind of find like true expression in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? Do you think it's important that you're anonymous for this case? I guess or that it's pseudo anonymous. I don't know how how doxed you are within GRITCULT.
So anonymity is, like you said, it's become different than what it used to be in the past decade. Because if you create an online persona which you identify with on a personal level, is that really anonymous anymore? Because it's you attach that to you, and even more you connect that with you. So it starts to merge with who you actually are. And when we are on that level, a face and a name does not even really matter anymore. Because those things are, you could say, the label and the package to your identity. But you already merge your identity with something you displayed and shared with the internet.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely true. And also, like, I mean, this like the online offline kind of duality starts to like dissipate, or it never really existed. Like, I feel like I guess like the verse persona online has started to bleed into like my real life interactions and vice versa. And this kind of like this like I hate using this word dialectic. It kind of creates like a more
If we look at dialectic as a spectrum, I guess we can understand it better, opposed to looking at dialectic as one black corner and one white corner.
mm-hmm.
Just avoid in between. It's always a spectrum. It's always integrals.
Mm-hmm.
And what you were also touching on is what GRITCULT does is nothing too new. We are just preparing and kind of giving a taste of what is happening anyway in most industries and branches coming to marketing. Because you cannot sell a singular product or even a singular idea anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be a universe opposed to a brand. You have to be a whole cosmos. So, for example, if you fail to convey a feeling or a certain sense of identification when sharing your thoughts and your ideas, then you already failed, because then the consumer is disconnected from what you're offering. And people nowadays, like I said, where the personal identity faded into an ocean, and the collective identity is starting to show its body. This is exactly where you have to prioritize interactive experience and interactive approach. And if you look into the world of social media, this is all already what has been happening all over fashion and arts and media, everything. So it won't be long until you see something like Facebook offering fitness nutrition, or something like Louis Vuitton having an airline.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is merging and interacting with each other, because you have to be in universe that encompasses your brand, and your brand has to stretch its tentacles out to every possible interactive aspect of the consumer's life and to play a part with it.
Yeah, that's very good insight. It makes, especially when you think about like, you know, modern brands now. We have like Amazon has hit every like retail corner possible, or like, you know, there's a reason why they created the branding of Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's a reason why, you know, Virgin Airlines or Virgin decided to make airlines and recording companies like that. Those are like the first kind of iterations of this idea you're talking about like marketing. You're selling the universe now. You're selling a community. You're selling like interactions across different, I guess, aisles or whatever. Like it is like a tentacle stretching out.
Yes, because the consumer wants to be part of the personality of the brand.
Mm-hmm.
It does not want to be sold. This is the difference. People do not want to be sold. They want to be involved. And this type of involvement is actually a collective coping mechanism that derives from the individual identity fading away. So now you have to cling onto something. And this is where we have to acknowledge the change that is happening and work with it in a way where we don't lose our integrity, because this is something that is highly possible that can happen in the next years if we are willing to give up too much of us for the sake of being involved.
That makes a ton of sense. I like that you said it's a coping mechanism for like the loss of like our individual self. It's so interesting that like this is kind of a theme. This is definitely a theme across a lot of the episodes. Is that like, you know, the internet kind of came and took away is like, you know, systematically destroying like hierarchical structures where you're being fed information, you're being fed a brain from like a centralized entity, and this interplay, these communities are propping up in their place. Um, Obviously, we see things like, you know, Uber is like a decentralized version of the whatever taxi companies or what have you. But like, and that's kind of like the first phase of things. But like, as increasingly as you're saying, like this interplay is what is just becoming, you know, the you know what the actual how society is actually choosing to self-organize. And yeah, the finding ways to make this like a integral whatever means is like the best is what we need to be doing. We need to be exploring these options and finding what the way to make sure that everyone can be most authentically displayed. You know, that makes sense. I like that. So what would you say is like the role of like what's would you say the role of like the esoteric, right? So if you're using symbology, if you're using you know hidden, I guess, like identities, or I don't know, for lack of a better way of expressing it. So what would you say the role of the esoteric in society nowadays is?
So, like what we just discussed implies that selling has moved from tangible to the intangible.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to sell an intangible product or an intangible feeling in order for a person to consume. And with that symbology, symbols and everything esoteric becomes a major weapon, you could say, or like an ace you can play out, because it is, like we said about symbols, it's the energy attached to it is so profound and so wired in our heads already that you just have to master using the correct symbols to convey what you actually gotta say.
Mm-hmm.
So they do the work for you. They already have life breathed into them.
Yeah,
You
very.
have
Oh yeah,
to
keep going.
master the use of it. And part of mastering the use is, of course, studying it, but also don't underestimate, like I said, don't underestimate mirroring your audience. or your followers. And things like that happen, of course, with trial and error and a lot of speculation and testing and just seeing what works. But symbols have been used by everyone, everything influential over the past decades and millennia. So we're just basically adopting that.
Very true. That brings me to my next question. Like, if you're saying like the esoteric is coming back and like symbology is coming back, do you think the role of like historic secret societies are going to be kind of revived? Obviously, like we're seeing a lot of like the Epstein stuff and the the British royal family stuff, and obviously it's links to like Hollywood and all these like historic secret societies like the Skull and Bones. They've always kind of been prominent, but I feel like there's a lot with the public backlash of their existence. I feel like that kind of only furthers to strengthen them myself. What do you think is the case with like historic secret society? Do you think the modern version of Esoterica will ultimately win, or do you think that they'll revitalize and have more weight?
So something else we have to discuss in regards to that is that the more the collective identity became strengthened, the less active we became and the more reactive we became. So the way events taking place or being perceived directly correlates to the reactivity level of people and their knowledge according to it. So because we live in a hyper-reactive society, I think that the truth behind those things will still not be able to shine on the surface. And it will reflect how it was in the past, but through different circumstances and for different reasons. If I understood your question correctly.
No, you did. I was taking in what you just said. So we're hyper reactive, and so sorry. So as I lost my train of thought. So basically, you're saying that like it's gonna maintain its strength because wait, sorry. Are you saying? Yeah, can you elaborate more? Actually, yeah, I just lost it.
It is being discussed more. So the quantity increases, but the quality of the essence of what is actually happening will still be hidden due to the truth being so buried under all of this reactivity. Opposed to in the past, where often the truth did not come to the surface due to the lack of reactivity or to the lack of access to it. So now everything is hyper accessible, which creates, I'm using your favorite word, dialectic, to what was happening in the past. So it swings in different sides, but creates the same outcome eventually.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Yes. So it's more accessible, but this kind of conversely makes it so that no more truth is being revealed.
Yeah, it's kind of being like the truth is being spread very thin. So nobody can really collect all the pieces and put it out.
Which also, again, keeps it hidden.
Exactly.
Which remains as if that makes sense.
It's hiding through spreading.
Gotcha. It's dissolving. Like, yeah, there's more.
Exactly, relating to identity, parallel to it. So, it's aspects of us seeking that truth. It's aspects of us seeking aspects of truth.
Gotcha.
So everything is kind of breaking apart. But
yes, that does make sense.
Whatever happens, like after the destruction of everything, it will eventually rebuild itself into a new type of structure and new forms, which we see are more collective-based structures. So we will also see the phenomena of different collective truths in the next years coming.
I agree with that. So I mean, we're already I definitely think it's going to accelerate, and there's going to be more of this like collective truth branching out. But we're already seeing people kind of notice that that's the case with like conversations about like echo chambers happening, where like people find themselves in information wells and they only see things that are similar to what they are already interested in seeing, because of like, you know, algorithms kind of diverting people into different, you know, categories. And, you know, I think that with echo chambers in combination with there being like no like central, you know, truth that anyone can kind of look to, I think you're definitely correct in that you're just going to create these like different collective entities with
It's
like
bubbles, basically.
these different bubbles. Exactly. I definitely see that coming about. Speaking of bubbles, how do you feel about like this weird online right wing of like high openness? Because there's like your conservative trad right wing, and then there's like this interesting kind of collection online right now of like people who like rigor and like whatever, some kind of right wing ideology, but from what I can tell, they're all very high in openness, which doesn't match trait wise with what is historically considered right wing.
You know, I'm just gonna say that everything which does not sustain itself long term is gonna fall apart eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And you saying that this is a modern phenomena also pretty much tells you that there's a lot of potential directions this can go, and from underestimation to overestimation. So what is truth and what lasts perpetuates itself, and like I said, branches out into different areas beyond one or two or three online bubbles or chambers into the reality of the collective again. So what sometimes seems strong in one corner is not really what made its way into the collective bloodstream yet. But on the internet, we sometimes fail to assess that correctly, especially if we consume too much. You know, reality is perception. So if our reality exists too much in something that in a side that is not resonating with the collective yet, we might maybe have some false picture of how big or how little of a role it seems. So I personally do not like to pinpoint or pigeonhole my ideas, and a lot of the concepts or content put on the account is just reflecting what I explained with GRITCULT, mirroring the follower. It's not necessarily my personal identity or someone else's personal identity from GRITCULT that we share. We're basically just part of our followers.
That makes sense. And when you consider your followers, that explains the connection there. I do like what you said about how it's like when there's you kind of can misjudge your impact since you're not part of the mainstream bubble, or like bloodline, I guess, blood flow, as you said. I find it interesting that we're both like hidden in a lot of ways, and that like people don't even know these people exist, which is the point of the podcast. But at the same time, you'll see things like, you know, zero HP's like thread being referenced on Joe Rogan, or like, I don't know, you'll see, you know, mainstream publications talk about things that are adjacent to this corner of the internet. So it is both, you know, influential. You're both upstream and kind of downstream at the same time. That's interesting. And so you mentioned before, like grit is literally being pulled from integrity, right? How does it, like, is that different than, grit as we know it, like in like a common language and common speak about, like, rigor and like pushing through adversity, or do you kind of view them as the same thing in that way?
It encompasses everything. Again, I don't want to explain the symbolism of it too much.
Oh yeah.
It's like I said, you have to be a universe, you have to be a cosmos nowadays in order to make your magnetic pole high. So I let people, I'm not going to pinpoint any interpretation here, because it is probably all of it and even more.
Very, I mean, yeah, very, very, very fair. You got to stay consistent. Also, we were asked about luck, and I know that luck is very big. You guys talk about luck a lot. Can you talk about like the role of luck, or like why is luck in particular something that you think is important?
So the luck thing, that was not even really planned. It kind of started spontaneously, like being used, like same with the esoteric secrets and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, if we look at ancient definitions of luck, it means to know one's path, and to be aware of it, which actually makes the term bad luck an oxymoron. It does not even exist.
Oh.
So luck is basically consciousness. And again, a lot of the words and hashtags we use is also a symbolism. So we're just spreading consciousness frequency through words that resonate with everybody. So the essence of it. So when we talk about luck, we talk about awareness and consciousness.
That's so funny, because that's like the complete opposite of like the Western concept of luck.
I'm an astrologer. It should already tell you that I do not believe in coincidences, and that I believe that luck is not a result of different coincidences happening in random timing, working out in your favor. I believe that luck is just like knowledge.
Just like knowledge, in that you have to, like, what do you mean just like knowledge?
It does not exist on a spectrum of, like, you cannot pinpoint it. It is good luck and bad luck. And it exists not in attachment to if you have it or not. Luck just is, same with knowledge. It is a state.
Gotcha.
It's a state of consciousness.
Would you say that that's similar to like the state of flow that people like to talk about, where you're like really in the zone and you're kind of like behaving kind of in tune with things? Would you say that luck is very similar to flow?
Yes. Because if you do not feel luck in those moments, where else do you feel it?
That's true. Yeah, that's when that's when you get those major insights and breakthroughs, is when you're in that flow state.
Like I said, luck is a vibration.
Okay. I like that. That's good, because I always felt like I had bad luck, but I like this interpretation much better. I definitely prefer the flow connotation.
Luck is actually derived from the goddess Lakshmi in India.
Oh, really?
Yes, and her name basically means to be aware of one's path, and she also rules cash flow and women. So
this sounds like my deity. So cash flow and women, Lakshmi, the goddess of luck.
Yes.
Very nice. Is there anything else like you want to like get across to, like, the audience, right? Because since this is a to try to keep with the GRITCULT theme, let's try to make it kind of like a interplay here. Is there anything you're trying to like that you'd like the audience to like understand about GRITCULT or understand about like?
The more abstract I leave it, the better they understand it.
Yeah, there it is. That's abstract in itself. Awesome. I really appreciate you coming on. I also appreciate the Vedic reading. And would you say like, I don't know. I guess yeah. I guess keep it abstract. There's that's probably the end. Then I guess it's really hard. It's hard to go on past that. That's pretty a great way to end it.
Yes, it's okay. An ocean has no beginning and end. So
very true.
You just have to swim. Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Goodbye.